Hi Elena, this is feedback on your Paper 2 Mark 1 exam that you did recently. As we look at question 1, you scored full marks for this one, so that's a good start, 4 marks in the bag. Moving on to question 2, where it asks you to summarise the differences between Henry and Eddie. You have made some clear comparisons between the two. You start off saying Eddie goes to a normal school and Henry's in boarding school. You describe the conditions that Henry's living in, being used like bears, mistreated and so on, and compare it to Eddie using the discourse marker on the other hand. Eddie has everything, and you've identified the two different time scales. You've mentioned that Eddie has a fun relationship with his father, but you've not stated anything about Henry's relationship with his father, which would have gained you more marks had you compared the two relationships with the respective fathers. Looking at the mark scheme for this question, for the differences and the inference, I think both are in level 2. Had you explained a little bit further about the differences in the relationships with the parents and possibly their different attitudes towards the fathers, like Eddie's makes fun of his father, whereas Henry is more formal when writing to his father, you would have gained higher marks going into band 3. Unfortunately, you've not really included any quotes to back up your points. You've listed the conditions that Henry's living in, the bread being nearly black and the bed stuffed with chaff, but you've paraphrased rather than used the actual quotes, and you've not used any quotes in the description of Eddie's situation. Unfortunately, that does limit your grade to possibly level 1. But I think as you've got 2 criteria from level 2, we can give you a mark of 3, which is the bottom end of level 2. Had you used direct quotes from the text, you would have scored 4, and had you included a little bit more in-depth inference, as I previously mentioned, you would have been in a band 3. You started off so well with this question, Elena. I don't know whether you ran out of time or you weren't sure where to go with it, but you've done the opposite of what most people have done, in that you have had good use of the subject terminology, repetition, emotion, hyperbole, but you've not given the quotes to demonstrate the points that you're making. Had you gone into detail and given examples of each one, repetition of "my dear father" makes it sound more like he's pleading with his father, and he's also trying to show how much his father means to him. And the use of emotive language, such as, "but I hope, my dear father, you will let me come home at Christmas, that we may once more meet again alive, if God permit me to live as long." And this suggests that he's trying to pull on his father's heartstrings to let him come home. He uses a hyperbole when describing the beds and the bread, saying that the bread is nearly black and it's made of the worst barley meal, and the beds are stuffed with chaff. And he also goes on to use a simile when describing the fact that they use more like bears than Christians. Again, all of this is meant to tell his dad how horrible the situation is and the conditions that he's living in, to try and persuade his dad to let him come home. As this question is worth 12 marks, you would need to make at least 4 points in that fashion. As it is, you've only scored 2 because you've not given any quotes or explanations of how the quotes meet the criteria that you've mentioned. Overall, you've scored 9 out of 24 marks for this, which, as it's your first attempt at the mock for this paper, it's not a bad score. and there are definitely things that you could build on to improve it for next time, and we've got 6 months to be working on this before your exam, so keep up the good work.